Hey folks, how's it going? Chuck Holton here. Thanks for watching the Hot Zone. I am in Kyiv, back in Kyiv. We just got here, kind of slept all day, slept off the jet lag, and we are now getting ready to go down to Kherson. As you've probably heard, the Russians have pulled out of that city down in the south, and the Ukrainians have moved in to great cheers from the people who live there, or the people who are left. Many of the people were forcibly deported back into Russia, hundreds of thousands most likely. And so that's going to be an ongoing issue they're going to have to deal with. And the other issues they're going to have to deal with down there are the fact that the place is mined and booby-trapped like crazy. The Russians on their way out destroyed everything infrastructure related that they could get their hands on. They destroyed the power infrastructure, the water infrastructure, the cell phone infrastructure, the medical care system, everything. They stole everything that wasn't nailed down, and they really destroyed that area. It's going to be interesting to see how those people continue to survive. But, you know, they're used to hardship after 9 months almost under occupation by the Russians. Very, very bad look for the Russians. And I made a story about it for CBN. Here's a longer version of the story that only you get to see. Check it out. After Kherson was abandoned by the Russian army, Ukrainian soldiers entering the city were immediately ambushed, though not by the enemy. Beleaguered residents rushed them with tearful hugs and kisses. Not long before, civilians shouted at the last Russian troops fleeing for the east bank of the Dnieper River. As soon as they had gone, these young people set about tearing down posters the Russians had put up nearly 9 months earlier. Now, spontaneous celebrations are taking place.
You have to have something which you live for, and this was the moment to live for. Liberation is not something happening every year. It's something in 5 generations, and it's a moment to stay.
For residents who suffered under Russian occupation, the last 9 months have been full of terror.
We knew only fear. We were afraid of everything. We were afraid of the sound of cars. We were afraid of using our telephones. We were hiding everything. We were hiding our kids.
They went for water and they were gone. They went to the market, gone. They went for medicines and disappeared.
More atrocities come to light with each passing mile, and Ukrainian authorities plan to thoroughly investigate them all. Kherson was spared destruction seen in other battles because the liberation came without the brutal house-to-house fighting normally required to dislodge an entrenched enemy. They did it by the clever use of 2 particular weapons, and you might be surprised to find most of the fighting was being done from underground. I visited the front lines in Kherson during the last days of the battle. If you're a soldier in this conflict, the most dangerous thing that can happen is being seen by the enemy, because if they know where you are, they can shoot you. And that means if you're even 5 or 10 kilometers away, you're still in danger. So I'm embedded with a unit right on the front lines, and I want to show you their headquarters, but I have to be very careful about how I do that so that I don't give away their position. Miles from Russian troops, deep in a hand-dug bunker, commanders monitor troop movements via a fleet of off-the-shelf drones broadcasting over a Starlink internet connection. Once an enemy tank is identified, the location is relayed to an artillery unit, which loads a GPS-guided artillery shell provided by the United States. The results speak for themselves. Then, American HIMARS rockets struck Russian supply depots deep behind enemy lines, which eventually made holding Kherson untenable. This 2-pronged strategy is so effective that thousands of Russian troops were abandoned on the wrong side of the river as they attempted to flee. Now, experts say Russia's options are decreasing rapidly.
So missile attacks is pretty much the only thing they have to make Ukraine suffer, to raise costs for allies, to support Ukraine. But that tactic is not working. And we have seen, since Russia destroyed almost 40% of Ukrainian energy grid, Ukraine still maintains its functioning, and Western assistance is actually increasing, not decreasing.
But here in Kherson, it will be a long time before things get back to normal.
It's difficult to live here. There is no water, no electricity, no heating, it's freezing, there is no internet. We are surviving the best we can.
While residents are eager to rebuild, now is the time to celebrate. It might be almost winter, but for the people of Ukraine, today feels like springtime. From Kherson, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News. So I had an interesting conversation with a guy today who is in Ukraine working with the Ukrainian military and some other NGOs and that sort of thing on some pretty amazing cutting edge stuff that is going to be really a game changer, not just for this war, but for the next war, and even will help the United States quite a bit. As you know, we've seen a large use of drones in this conflict, so much so that the Ukrainians are really rewriting the book on remote warfare, automated warfare, and figuring out ways to take on the Russians. That's one of the reasons why they've done so well. Now, you have to understand that this is really a contest here between two ways of thinking, the old Soviet military strategy and the Western military strategy that's been sort of honed by the last 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that war is not anything like this war. They're very different, but a lot of the lessons that were learned in Iraq and Afghanistan do apply. And so this has been really fascinating to see. Both the Ukrainian and the Russian army started out with a sort of an old Soviet infrastructure, mindset, and the strategy and techniques and tactics in their military. The Ukrainians have been able to really quickly adapt using Western mindset, Western sort of ideology in their warfighting, because they've received a lot of support and a lot of advice from Western sources. Now, not all of these come from Western governments. Many of the soldiers and Marines and sailors and stuff that have come over here from the United States that wanted to do something in Ukraine have taken on the role of passing on that institutional knowledge that they had from 20 years of war in Iraq and Afghanistan. You have to understand, there are a lot of people that are veterans of the U.S. military that are very unhappy with the results of their service in the U.S. military because of what happened in Afghanistan, specifically with the dramatic pullout, sort of abandoning our allies there and watching the whole thing crumble. A lot of troops, you think about this, they join the military because they want to fight evil. They want to go find bad guys and shoot them in the face. And especially over the last 5 years or so in Afghanistan, they weren't really allowed to do that. The guys that were being sent over there were being made to stay on post. Most of the fighting was being done either by the Afghans or by proxies, contractors, things like that. And these guys joined to fight evil, and they ended up guarding a concrete block. And that really was not very satisfying for them. This conflict offered to them a real black and white dichotomy between good and evil. And they knew that if they came and fought on the side of the Ukrainians, that they'd be fighting evil in the form of a country that invaded their neighbor unjustly and was murdering civilians in dramatic fashion. And so they felt like that was a very good way to put their skills to use. However, one of the things that we've seen here is that the guys with the most military experience are typically not going out and fighting on the front lines. They're not becoming the trigger pullers. They're not joining the Foreign Legion. The guys who join the Foreign Legion are typically guys who did not get to fight in Iraq and Afghanistan, even if they were over there. They're unsatisfied with their combat experience, or they're guys who never got to join the military. They're airsofters or Antifa guys or something like that who want to see what combat is like, and they see this as their opportunity to do so. And that's why a lot of those guys are getting killed. The Ukraine has been like, hey, you want to go to the front line? We'll give you what you want. And they've sent them right up to the very front lines, and a lot of those guys have been killed and maimed in this conflict. The guys who have the most combat experience, the special operations guys, they typically come over here and they say, wow, these guys don't know how to put on a tourniquet. These guys don't know how to create sectors of fire or put in a proper fighting position or do a route reconnaissance or movement to contact, things like that. And so I can do better by training the Ukrainians what to do than I can by going out and actually being a trigger puller myself. And so we've seen lots of guys come over here and form 501c3s and form NGOs that are not only helping the people who are needy, but they're also going out with the Ukrainian military and they're providing that assistance, that advise and assist role that the U.S. military has tried to do, but really has not done very well. Part of the reason they do better, I think, is because they don't have so much stuff to give the Ukrainians. They don't, and typically what we've seen in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria is that we go as the U.S. military, we say we're here to advise and assist, and the Iraqis are like, yeah. What stuff do you have? What do you have to give me? We want armored vehicles. We want air assets. We want bombs and bullets and things like that. Here, these guys are coming and they're saying, I don't have any bombs or bullets to give you, but I've got knowledge and I'm happy to pass that on for free. And the Ukrainians are like, well, shoot, better than nothing. We'll give it a shot. And they have actually benefited greatly from that advice. So something that I've been hearing about, little rumblings of, we've seen how the Ukrainians have put drones to incredible use in dramatic fashion against the Russian armor, and they've made a $1,000 off-the-shelf commercial drone almost equal to a tank in combat power. They've really multiplied their combat power using those drones in many ways, and we could do several episodes about how they've done that. Suffice it to say that now they are experimenting with some sort of swarm technology using a lot of drones all at once to deny territory to the enemy. Now think about this. They send in some some drones that are maybe fixed wing that have a very good capability from a vision standpoint. They've got good cameras on them. They send those in, they look at an area and they can find enemy positions. It's a lot of wide open country out there. And so if the enemy's going to be anywhere, they're going to be in those hedgerows that are between the fields. And so they can scrutinize those hedgerows with these air assets for a wide area, and they can find where the enemy is at. Then they can send other like kamikaze drones, loitering munitions out there, which are actually very cheap. They're producing them for less than $1,000 each out here. From a military standpoint, that is ridiculously cheap. They send those out and they go out to where they know the enemy is, and they literally just, with very precise targeting, take out those enemy positions. And fascinating to hear how good they're getting. And, you know, one of the reasons that artillery is so large, you know, we have 155 millimeter artillery that creates a huge crater. We send missiles in there that create, you know, a swimming pool and take out whole buildings and things like that. One of the reasons that they have to do that is because they can't be precise enough to take out the enemy where he is, or they don't know where he is. So they just blow up an entire, you know, grid square, hoping to kill whatever enemy is in there. With these drones, with the technology, the vision is so good that they can see the enemy. They can see him over time. They can layer by layer of photographs over the map. And over time, they can see where dirt gets disturbed, where they're digging. They can see where there's movement. They can see new tracks in the snow or in the mud. And they can track the enemy very precisely to the point where the enemy really can't come out from underground, because it was the minute he does, one of these tiny little loitering munitions comes in about the size of a hand grenade and kills the guy and blows him up. They can, in that way, keep the enemy underground. And what this is going to lead to is this is going to lead to automated warfare, remote warfare. One of the things I saw when I was down in Kherson a week ago is that a large amount of the fighting is being done from underground. They're launching these drones, the drones are finding the bad guys, and then they're firing very precise fires on those bad guys from very far away. So the front lines are not so much, this still happens, but not so much like they used to be, where you have trench lines and you have forces that are going hand-to-hand combat getting that close to each other. They don't need to get that close to each other, because they're going out and destroying the enemy from 10 miles away before they even get close. And if you think about how this is going to affect the future of warfare and how the U.S. military is watching this stuff very closely, we've given $16 billion so far to the, maybe $17 billion now to the Ukrainians that they've actually received in aid. And a lot of people say that's a lot of money, but consider that the U.S. military budget is about $800 billion a year. $16 billion is a drop in the bucket, right? We're not even to 10% yet of our annual military budget that we've given to Ukraine. And because of that, to spend $16 billion to get the kind of data, to get the kind of information, and to have a laboratory, a combat laboratory in which to try out new technologies in a real world environment where, you know, we're going up against our actual adversaries without putting U.S. troops at risk, that's worth far more than $16 billion. If you told the generals at the Pentagon that if they wrote a check for $16 billion, they could get that kind of information, they would have done that all day long. So this is a very valuable thing. As horrible as it is, as horrible as this war is for the civilians that are being affected, it's an incredibly valuable thing for the military, the U.S. military, that will save lives in the long run as long as we learn the lessons of this conflict. One of the things that I fear is that they say the generals are always fighting the last war, not the next war. Hopefully they're learning from those mistakes, and they're not going to be sending troops in the next time we go to war with a mindset that comes straight out of Afghanistan. Hopefully they will have learned from Ukraine. And, you know, we had some commitments to Ukraine before this thing started, so it's not surprising to me that we have put so much into helping them win. And even aside from the moral ramifications of watching an evil entity overrun its neighbor, and standing by and doing nothing, I think as Americans, from a moral standpoint, we shouldn't do that. That doesn't necessarily mean we need to be sending weapons, but it does mean that we should be doing whatever we can to help. And the military is helping in a lot of ways that don't include sending weapons. But even aside from the military, former soldiers, veterans of the United States are going above and beyond and making big strides in helping the Ukrainians put together technology that is going to help them win this war, hands down. You watch, and I'm not big on predictions of the future, but I will just say that when the final chapter is written from this war, we're going to look back and say that Ukraine came out the clear winner, and that it was a boon in technology and information and data and learning for the United States. That's all I've got for today. Thanks for watching the Hot Zone. I appreciate it. We'll see you later.